Hey, Chitra.
Hey Julia, how are you?
Good. I'm glad that you're up for doing this interview. The way I usually start is just by asking people to introduce themselves. But before I do that, I just want to say um, just love working with you. And I met you I met you through a party at my house, didn't I?
Yes, through Megan.
Yeah, through Megan. Yeah, through a good friend, the Iron Butterfly ladies. And Chitra herself is an iron butterfly. And actually, I'll link in the article to your iron butterfly episode.
Okay.
So is that bad?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. So, so yeah, so can you introduce though yourself, how the way you'd like to be introduced in terms of your background and how it relates to what we're doing at Lightroot? Chitra is also senior advisor at Lightroot or strategy advisor at Lightroot,
Um,
also senior advisor.
so yeah, so I think I'm like always finding like weird ways to say how whatever I'm doing in the whatever I did in the past is related to whatever I'm doing today.
Yeah, don't do that. I hate
Yeah.
it when people ask me that because you don't have to relate what you did in the
Yeah.
past to what you did now, but just say whatever you want about what's interesting. How about that?
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, so I would say if I had to characterize myself, I accidentally found myself, enamored with the intelligence community, have spent my life kind of supporting this particular part of industry, and have learned over the years how to kind of throttle a lot of things on the emerging tech side with the things that are happening in the government. And there's a lot of things in the federal sector that can be frustrating, but there's a lot of really cool things inside too. So I always find it interesting. I think the way I like to look at it is there's a lot of goodness in this, crazy machinery that is part of the kind of, national security defense infrastructure. And there's a lot of goodness that happens out in like, commercial tech. And I like those places where things kind of mash up, right? So I think um, finding ways to change our thinking or accelerate our thinking because of these funny little mashups is where I kind of jam the most. And I think that there's actually like, again, for a funny, stodgy, nobody thinks of creativity usually when they think about the government, but there's a lot of really interesting things that are, under the hoods. And I think it's always fun to find new ways to kind of advance those funny things in like deep dark pockets.
Cool. So that's an intriguing way to introduce yourself.
Like
Immediately, I'm
I
like, tell
like
me all your
my
secrets.
introduction then to that is then I like to like, you know, I've always been lucky in finding myself kind of around these interesting people that like to think similarly and also have a little bit on trying to help national security. So that's all I am. I'm just, this, I guess, person who's fond of those funny problems and like the people that like to chase those problems.
You're a people supporter and a people extender, but
Yes,
you're
and
also an
connector of things.
idea generator. Say that again.
And connector of things.
Yeah, yeah, connector of things, connector of people, connector of ideas. Yeah, yeah, I see all that in you. Um, what is, can I ask you, this is sort of, I don't know why I'm asking you this question. I never know why I'm asking a question, but it occurs to me to ask you if there was one thing that was missing, like let's imagine you have all the sort of activities in your work life that you currently have, except there's one thing that's missing. So like all your things are like people extension, idea generation, idea connector, idea extension, people generator, because I know you're a mom. So it's like, so taking the mom thing aside, because I know that that can't be missing. But if you had to remove something that that's kind of like clutter that you wish you didn't have to do, what would it be?
Hmm. I was like, can household work be part of that?
Like in the work arena.
No, but even that sometimes has value. No,
Yeah.
it's hard to say. Like, I think I actually, it sounds really cliche and weird to say this, but I actually don't know that I would do well without the clutter.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
I think we need the clutter.
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah. From one sort of ADD person to another. Yes, I understand. It's like you need the radio going while you're doing the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And so then I'll ask the opposite question. If there's something that is there something that without that thing, you would no longer be interested?
Mm. Um, I think it has to be exciting. I think like so to me, I think I get more energy off of the excitement of the rest of the people involved. And
Yeah,
if people are like, okay, I'm just doing this because this is what I get paid to do, right?
yeah.
That tends to be less exciting, right? So if I had to pick, right? Crazy idea with lots of energy is always more appealing than solid idea with lower energy.
Oh my God, I'm the same way. That's so scary.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
100%, right? It's like the moonshot is always more interesting than the incremental.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, same. Okay. Well, here we are with our moonshot. So when it comes to the world of lace, I mean, so I'm writing this, group of essays that are largely interviews about what we're hoping to accomplish with this lightweight AI computing ecosystem. Um, and we are a group of people who are focused on moonshots, and we are sort of like waving at the world saying, we're doing things differently, and maybe there's no box that you know how to put us in, and we'll just keep going until you figure it out. So those things are all true. And I think I'll ask the two sort of similar questions. In an idealistic sense, where do you hope this thing goes, best case scenario? And in a practical sense, because I know that you also think practically, where do you think this goes in a more, uh, I guess, constrained scenario?
I mean, I think they're actually both like the same in my head. Um, and I say that because I think in like the best scenario, like it commoditizes really fast and becomes this thing we take for granted because it just is. And you know, nobody wonders too much or puts a lot of thought today in like how our networking infrastructure works and TCP IP and I think there was a moment in time when we were all concerned about IP addresses and that went away really fast and here we are, right? So in my head, I'm like, this feels like it has the potential to have that same legacy of like commoditizing and turning into nothing that anyone pays attention to. And the critical thing to do that is that we trust it. We
Yeah.
don't wonder about it. We don't question it, right? So I think everything like this, like it becomes interesting at that magnitude because nobody will care, and it can only get to that point where nobody will care if we sit there and say, I know that it's not going to do something disruptive on the back end. I'm not going to have to second guess it. I'm not going to have to, wonder what's happening with this with this infrastructure, right?
So when you say trusted, though, like I immediately go, well, you're not saying just trust it blindly without any evidence that it's secure,
Yeah.
right?
I'm saying we basically have with the hard work to do is to get to where it is proven and demonstrated over and over and over and over again to where we don't have to think twice about it, right? And that's a long pull.
Yeah.
It might not get there anytime soon, but I think to me that would be the interesting promise is we really figure out what it means for this stuff to work in a way where we don't have to worry.
Yeah. And I just want to get to the point where we can just type in a query for an AI at the prompt
Yeah.
on the web. And
Yes.
and we don't really care which AI or know even which AI is getting which set of AIs is getting paid to do the computation.
Yeah.
As long as they're in sort of the reputation network that we are allowing ourselves to use.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they're sort of pre-vetted nodes.
And that's really hard because, I think there's something very altruistic that we talk about related to the reputation network.
Yeah.
And I love that idea. And I know it's really hard to do because like, the best thing probably um, that touches us all that are like, that's more analogous is like, Amazon's recommendation engine, right?
Right.
Uh, but that has like clear motive and
100%.
not altruistic at all. So like you're just like, so how do you really do this and balance all of these elements? And it's a nice, interesting challenge.
It's an interesting challenge for decentralized. That's sort of the reason why people love, peer-to-peer decentralized networks is the whole idea is that it's not supposed to be biased and they're supposed to, but then of course at the very fundamental code base, if there's something hidden in there that creates this bias,
Yeah.
then the whole system is biased. So that's what we have to, that's why we have a bunch of idealistic people working on this and trying to influence the code base people who are also a bunch of idealistic people and
Yeah.
trying to keep out I guess it's a desire for dominance or control of what is supposed to be decentralized.
Yeah.
And so that brings me to these principles, these world principles that we're talking about infusing in LACE. So wisdom, openness, resilience, love, and diversity. These things are key to infuse. And then the very first article I talked about, this is how, there's very vaguely about each of them, and this is how we might infuse them into the AI network that we're building, LACE. But I'm curious which one resonates, which one or ones resonate with you. What's your passion among those?
If I had to lean into one, I probably will pick the diversity one because especially on the federal side, right? I feel like um the last, I don't know, like 20 years or so, all I see is you know, continued noise, I guess, for no better expression. But we are in love with marketplaces. We think about lots of different things. There's always a slightly different algorithm that does something slightly better or worse, and I need it for some other purpose. But it's always difficult to figure out that matching, right? How do I think about my use case, my application, my data, my mission? How do I think about even like within a data set, like how I looked at normalization of that data or filtering of that data to support it. Like there's so much nuance in all this. And so when you think about it, like it's always going to be this like end-to-end problem where you are overwhelmed with your choices, right? And we continue to, innovate more and more, and we should never stop that. But then how do we start making better, effective decisions for whatever objective we have? And then so to me, like the value here and the thing that becomes really interesting is like I don't have to throttle down the diversity in order
Right.
to get something that's better, right? Maybe at the end I can continue to say we can still amp it up, and at the end I can
Yes.
still again trust that the system will know what right things to bring in context to each other in order to solve the thing I'm trying to solve, right? So
Right.
it to me that becomes really interesting. It's almost I feel like it's kind of like nature, right? Like
Yes.
there's continue like biodiversity, all this diversity we see, right? And minimizing the diversity doesn't enrich the environment. And sometimes it looks like there's too much, but like it's a matter of like, well, how do they all actually all work in concert? And it's a tough thing, and it's something that happens so easily just physically in nature, and we got to figure out like what do we do and how do we translate that, because the easy answer is to throttle it down, right? And to say, well, everything has to conform in a way that I know how to consume it, but then you don't end up with like the best outcome.
Well, that also speaks to why the noise happens. So you were talking about
Yeah.
the noise, right? And so the noise happens because I think there's like it's not a choir. It's literally a bunch of different people. I mean, so I'm sorry, I'm auditorily focused. So a choir is a bunch of people singing with different voices that comes out in this beautiful sort of diverse array of you've got the sopranos and the tenors, etc. And this diverse array of sound and these timbres of voices, and they come together and it's really beautiful. That's the kind of diversity that we're going for. But what has happened is this noise is because it's like each person figuring out a different solution and then wanting to control it, or
Yeah.
not figuring out a solution and wanting to control the information so they don't look bad for not knowing the solution. And so
Yeah.
it's when people are in a, it feels to me when people are in a system that's like a control system, or their theory is that it's simple enough that you can control it.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that it's a complex system that you actually can't control. Um, that's when noise happens. And when this choir happens with these diversity of voices, and that's really productive and beautiful, is when people realize this is authentically a, uh, a diverse and complex system. And the
Yeah.
only way to manage that is decentralized communication. I wouldn't even use control, decentralized interaction.
Yeah, and I really like your symphony example, because then like, so, I come from more of an imaging background, from a, technical education perspective. And so when you think about like signal to noise, it's never about like, trying to wipe away the noise. It's all about suppression of the noise and amplification of the signal, right? So on any given day for any given thing, you're you're playing with your amplifiers, and you're figuring out what you're suppressing. You're not getting rid of, because like there, it might be that you need it for something else, right? So I think it's an interesting signal problem. And um and I think we have to sit there and say, hey, like there's lots of value in a lot of these things, and we never know what we need at any given time until, and if we throw it away, we definitely don't get it, right? And so you got to figure out, how do you do this? And the other aspect of this that I like, related to the way we've been discussing all of this, is, I think it's genuinely the free market enterprise concepts that we've all like loved and endeared ourselves with in like the Western world, right? And the things that are good and valuable to an outcome,
Yeah.
are the ones that make its way through. Okay, here's my disruptors.
Oh, can we meet your disruptors?
Are you gonna come say hi? Are you gonna come say hi? Hold on. I'm gonna have to change my blur. Hold
I
on.
never knew your daughter was so blurry. It's like life will out, right? The truth will out, the diversity will out, and you might as well use it for the good rather than have it be the noise, right? And so
Yeah,
this is a way to use it to get to an end goal that's very powerful. It's
yeah.
I sort of feel like this could be incredibly grandiose, but that's okay. I sort of
Grandiose is good.
I don't know. It's whatever it is,
Maybe.
but it is what it is. But I sort of feel like it's also, as we solve the problems of peer-to-peer decentralized AI, we are solving the same problems of peer-to-peer human intelligence interaction, right?
Yeah,
Like, exactly. Like, is she coming back? Let's see. Oh, here's the grandiose thing that may or may not be grandiose. It just sort of speaks to this. It's that as we are solving the problems of peer-to-peer decentralized AI, we are solving the problems of what it means to be a person who's in a community who's trying to solve problems that make the world a better place, right?
yeah,
So so it's all the same thing. People don't actually react well to autocratic control. Right?
yeah,
It doesn't really work. If you want people to do things, it works to incentivize each person. It works to give them their own autonomy and help them figure out what they're good at and how they're going to respond to negotiations. Like this is what works for people. And
yeah,
so as the whole world transitions from sort of centralized control to decentralized control, this is sort of a sandbox. And
yeah.
that's part of why I'm excited about this. Since I was a kid, I've been trying to address the question of why can't we all get along? And I think the answer is because we're not decentralized.
No, it's funny that you bring it up like this. Like, when I was a kid, we were on a trip to visit in India, and there was I always had my own little issues with religion, just because I was like, y'all are saying the same thing but a little different, and then everyone's like, this is my club and you're not invited to my club. So it
Right.
always felt a little funny to me. So we went to visit this little town, this like French settlement in southern India called Pondicherry. And there was this area that's basically like a commune, I think, for all intensive purposes. But it was really interesting because You go there and everybody has like a thing they contribute. There's no like job that pays to do something, but it's like if you were a doctor, then you are the doctor for all these people. If you have like whatever your skills are, you kind of bring your skills and you do stuff, right?
Right, like a kibbutz.
Yeah, like a kibbutz. And so there's like it was an interesting thing, and they kind of built a lot of like natural products in there, and it was very like, and especially like I feel like, at that time, and I think that was like the 80s, 90s when I saw some of that stuff. It was very fascinating to me, but it was still very interesting because it was like at the end, the problem with all these kind of societal implementations is there is a set of people that are AKA the leaders that determine what your skill sets are that have you do something in some function. And
Right,
then you all are happy to contribute in whatever function. And so you're like, okay, well, it still doesn't quite make it because you can't actually like grow and figure out stuff and like just be, right? And so
right,
it's like halfway in, but it solves this one problem, but it introduces the other problems. And I think it's kind of in that same mode where like we're kind of like mixed in our head in this like kibbutz style philosophy, and we don't really know. I don't think we have a good analog for what decentralization really offers, and so we don't
right.
have a way to frame it. And
Yeah,
new, and we'll have to figure out how this works, right? But I think the problem is like, we think like, well, if it goes amok, we can't put it back together.
right,
It's like but it is the way it's the way physics works, right? Because like,
right.
that's
It's
it generally.
it falls apart into a new part, right?
Yeah.
It's
So
yeah,
it's kind of interesting, but I think there's definitely something novel in like the notion. I think that nobody controls it, and good things. And obviously, like you could on the flip side say like bad things could similarly happen, but then that's where we have to figure out like how do you put the safeguards in, right? And what are the things that we pay attention to you know, prevent, complete like anarchy in the system or something, right?
well, I don't know if preventing anarchy is really, but I think what you mean is preventing bad stuff
Yeah,
to some extent. Every system will have bad stuff that goes on and that will be exploited to do various things. But what can you do at the very ground level to try to discourage that?
yeah,
Yeah,
on some level, right? And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and I think, and I do think that like all physical systems or anything you design, like or even just people, right? The philosophy of like most things will always, you want to take the path of least resistance. I think that's still valid, right?
Yeah.
Even if we design this type of a system.
Yeah. Oh, especially if we design this type of, or
Especially,
that
right?
that
Because
we are designing.
the incentive model um depends on it, right? And so I think, you've got a lot of good things going for yourself, and you're like, hey, there's a lot of, I think, philosophy kind of baked in, but in most cases, I think the thing that's most exciting is like this is actually workable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually workable and it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's scary. Like it sometimes scares me. Like I'm like, wait, are we really doing this? And it's like, yeah, because it's the next step. It's the thing that has to happen. It's bigger than us and it's appropriate and there's going to be problems and there will be solutions to those problems. And potentially we could use the system itself to solve some of those problems. So it's exciting. I really love that when you were a kid, you were thinking about that. Those are exactly the kind of thoughts I would have had as a kid on that trip in that experience. It's like, now wait a minute, this is sort of like England telling people you're in class A and you're in class B, right?
Yes, and you serve, and I've assessed your skill set, but it's interesting, right? And you have to sit there and think like, why are these things like still around, right? And there's always like new versions of all these things that pop
Oh,
up
well,
everywhere.
exactly. And how do we do such a reputation scoring system that's not based on we've assessed your skill
Yes,
set and this is what you're available
yes,
to more like, yeah, right? I mean, so like how can we do reputation scoring on things that are appropriate but not that can be changed? Like
yeah,
I
and
want a
knowing that
node.
everything will evolve, right? Even your
Yeah,
AI will evolve.
yeah. I want a node to be able to change everything. You know, like I used to have this much uptime, now I have this much uptime. I used to have this kind of computation, now I do this kind of computation. I used to work with sex traffickers, now I don't. You know?
Yeah,
So that would be good.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So all right. Well, I am feeling good about this conversation. How are you feeling? Is there anything you want to add? I think diversity is a really key piece.
No, I think this is going to be awesome. And I think, you know, like I said, like I've always found myself lucky in that I've met lots of amazing thought leaders in the government. Even though a lot of people kind of, you know, diss on the government. And I think it's going to be, you know, fun to see how this part of the world that we live in can not just be part of the story, but can help kind of lead and frame the story, right?
Amen. Yeah. All right. Thank you. All right.
Cool.
Thanks for your time. This has been awesome.
No, this has been great.